People have always loved reading, but more recently, they seem to like watching things even more. So if you're Hollywood, the question is, how do you take the stories that people have previously only experienced in text and adapt them on screen so that you can make either summer blockbuster profits from short attention span teenagers, or just get praise from the snobbier critics? Well, there's several ways you can go about it. You could choose a work from a prolific author like Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park. This gives you the basic formula you need for a movie already. The hardest part is just replicating the visual effects described in text into an exciting movie. Aside from that, the pacing and arc of the characters discovering a soon-to-be open theme park gone awry maps on pretty well to a 2-hour feature as is. And if you want a TV example, HBO's Game of Thrones does this pretty well too. All of the source material is already fantastical or interesting enough to be deserving of visual presentation. It's more just a matter of choosing the stories you want to tell within that much larger literary treasure trove that the author gave you. The formula is just a time-tested traditional story with the occasional bit of dinosaur or dragon sprinkled in for some excitement. The production budget won't be cheap, but spectacle done well and with a little bit of depth on its own can have a huge impact on popular culture. You could also be a little more ambitious and do what David Fincher did with Chuck Palahniuk's book, Fight Club. The novel Fight Club is, spoiler alert, a doozy. A main character struggling from insomnia meets a crazy acquaintance who leads him to rebel against the tyranny of modern capitalism by embracing primal masculinity and getting out repressed anger in a weekly series of bar fights, and eventually to blow up a bunch of buildings that reset the economy. The twist in Fight Club is that the whole time, our main character and his friend are inhabiting the mind of the same person. So our narrator's crazy friend is really just a figment of the imagination fighting for control. David Fincher, a self-labeled misanthrope and fan of dark drama, is the perfect director for adapting Fight Club, because he can apply his own style and acquire amazing performances from the likes of Brad Pitt as the crazy alter ego of the main character, to make a compelling movie out of a niche book. Throw in a stylish and unforgettable end credits scene, and you have the recipe for a movie that, while perhaps not a commercial blockbuster, will go on to gain cult status among many and become deeply embedded in pop culture. First rule of Fight Club, anyone? You could be even more daring and adapt a book that's more depressing and idiosyncratic than Fight Club, as the former directors of Lost did with Tom Perotta's The Leftovers. 2% of the world's population disappears, and the rest of the world deals with the ensuing chaos. The first season of this HBO show loosely follows the book, but it wasn't until the television series started going more off script from the book in its latter 2 seasons that it reached near universal critical acclaim. While few actually watched The Leftovers, it was successful as an adaptation because it was uncompromising in capturing the emotional core of its source material while being bold enough to shake up the mechanics of the story, all under the watchful direction of their original author, resulting in a Goldilocks perfect, limited run of just 3 seasons. And then, you can be completely insane and try to adapt Jose Saramago's 1995 novel, Blindness, translated to English in 1997. In this book, the inhabitants of an unnamed city succumb to an infection of strange blindness where all they see is white rather than black. The government hastily tries to quarantine and contain the situation, but as the world reaches apocalypse, the darker side of human nature is revealed, and conditions and resources rapidly deteriorate. In 1998, the novel won the Nobel Prize, and it's not hard to see why. As readers, we follow several unnamed characters listed chiefly by their occupation, ranging from a prostitute to the wife of an ophthalmologist. Saramago employs a wonderfully unique style of dialogue and narration which manifests in long, seemingly uncontrolled sentences and loosely separated exchanges between characters that make the experience of reading Blindness almost as difficult and strange as the world has become for the fictional characters within it. It's a wonderfully unique book that, like the best of apocalyptic fiction, demonstrates how horrible people can be when everything goes to shit, quite literally. There's occasional moments of relief and beauty to break up the misery as well, like when the characters wash their dirty selves in rain from a balcony and express delight at their newfound physical and emotional purity. All of this beautiful use of the medium of text and deep commentary on human nature is exclusively within the domain of books. So how exactly anyone got the rights to make a movie out of a book about as well suited to the silver screen as anything made by Adam Sandler is a mystery. Saramago must have eventually relented though, because in 2008, 10 years after the publication of an English translation, this mess of a movie somehow materialized. It might seem cynical to say that such a project is destined to failure, but when the director lazily translates the action from the book onto the camera without a second thought for the actual meaning of those words, it's hard to see how you can even be successful. This wasn't just your average B movie either. A lot of money was spent on visual effects and acquiring talented actors like Mark Ruffalo and Julianne Moore. Unfortunately, cash doesn't make for good art. And don't listen to me, just look at respected film critic Roger Ebert's thoughts. Or the Rotten Tomatoes score. Even just watching the movie trailer for Blindness, it's obvious that instead of being creative with adapting a book that benefits from abstract interpretation, the filmmakers just treated the events of the book as their screenplay. There's no benefit to seeing the performance of Julianne Moore as the doctor's wife, no matter how convincing the actress manages to be at crying, when the context for a character's joy and suffering doesn't even exist. When you strip away the narrator's darkly comic reflections on what the characters are experiencing and just recreate the chain of tangible events, shot for shot, you're left with a pretty bog standard and mediocre science fiction movie. And to point out the obvious, how do we as the audience empathize and understand what's going on when 99% of the characters in the story are supposed to see nothing but a milky sea of white? It would have been more bold and inventive had the movie actually decided to just be a voiceover of whiteness for the majority of its running time. At least that would have been conceptually interesting. So, what can the disastrous film Blindness teach us, besides that sometimes even talented professionals will do anything for a paycheck? Well, in short, everything not to do when adapting a book. There's nothing to gain from watching Blindness, aside from some unintentional laughs.
I can't see. Somehow that patient infected me.
That's impossible. Nobody goes blindly.
Just go and read the book instead. It's worth your time.